short Vort Parshas Vayeira. So we know that Avram was faced with 10 tests in his life, and perhaps the hardest test that he faced was the test described in this week's Parsha, which is where Abraham is commanded to take his one and only son from his wife, his beloved wife, Sarah, onto a mountain and sacrifice him as an offering to Hashem. Now we know the end of the story, where HaKadosh Baruch Hu sends an angel to tell Abraham that you've completed the test and you've proven yourself to be a worthy servant of Hashem. I'm going to paraphrase from Rashi on the right side of the screen. The verses that I have on the left side of the screen are the continuation after this event. And the Medrash says, which Rashi paraphrases, is that Abraham was like, wow, I only had one son from Sarah, and I almost just offered him as a sacrifice. If I would have gone through and offered him as a sacrifice, I would have no descendants through Sarah. So, you know what? He used this as a moment of inspiration to say, okay, well, now that my son is still alive, Baruch Hashem, let's try to get him married. Let's try to get him married. And so this is what the verse is over here. The verse is like the first verse I have highlighted. It says, and after these words, it was told Abram, saying, behold, Milcah has also borne children to your brother Nahor. And in verse 23, it says, Besuel fathered Rivka. These 8, Milcah bore to Nahor, the brother of Abraham. So we learn about Rivka in verse 23. In verse 23, it teaches about Rivka, who Yitzhak would go on to marry. And now, in between the verses, and even the verse afterwards, it goes on and it lists other relatives of Rivka and other descendants of Nahor. So now, Rashi, on the right side of the screen, says that really this whole, from verse 20 to verse 24, is only like there because of verse 23. Meaning verse 23, which describes Rivka's birth, is the only part that's important, and she's the only person that's important. If you go and look and read these verses yourself, they go and list all these descendants of Nahor and of Besuel and Milcah. Yet Rivka's the only one that matters. So the Torah does something kind of strange, right? It lists all these people who are really not necessary to our story at all. They don't function at all in the continuation of the Jewish people except for Rivka. And we know the Torah doesn't like to waste words. So why does it come and it lists all these people who have no bearing on the future of the Jewish people? Just say verse 20 and verse 23 and you can get rid of 21, 22, and 24. What are we supposed to learn here? So what we have to know is that the Torah is a book that every single thing contains wisdom in it. And from the message that I one time heard from a very smart person to answer this question, we can see the godless of Abraham over here. So you see, when there are many people in today's world that can relate to the following. You have a girl who graduated high school and all her friends started getting married one after the other, and she's at all the weddings and she's happy, and at first she's like, oh, okay, great, amazing wedding, but by the time, she's like 24, 25 years old and 2/3 of her class is already married and she's not married, you could see the dim smile. Her smile starts to dim in the photos with all the other bridesmaids. And you see this also with childless couples. People get married and they don't have a child after a year, after 2 years, and they're hearing about all their friends who have children and they don't have children. You start to see a dimness in their smile. That with every successive person, every successive year that they hear about where they don't have children and other people have children, it compounds the pain. See, it would be one thing if for like 1 or 2 years this person was unmarried, or 1 or 2 years this person just didn't have children, but it compounds the pain when you hear about other people getting engaged or about other people having children. It compounds your pain during this time. So the answer over here is that it lists all the descendants of Abraham, all the descendants of Nahor and all the relatives of Rivka, because these were people born to Abraham's brother, or at least in his genealogy. Abraham probably heard or knew about the existence of these people. So not only was he childless with Sarah for all of these years, his other family, people who were probably not as righteous as him, were having babies like crazy. So this magnified the test. So this is not brought, what we're looking at in the screen is not brought because of the continuation of the Jewish people. It's brought because it amplifies the test of the Akedah. It amplifies the test of when Avraham Avinu had his son on the mountain and was asked to sacrifice him. Because not only was this a child that he had in his old age and he had been childless for so long, and that was what made the test so hard, it was that this child was the child he had after all the pain of hearing about other people having children while he was childless. Meaning, if everybody else is childless, okay, you don't feel so bad. But when everybody else is having children around you, with every successive birth, it makes you feel kind of worse. So this amplified the test that Abraham had to go through. So I thought that it was a very beautiful answer. And now we see that everything in the Torah, there's wisdom, even in these names that seem to not matter for anything going forward, there's still some wisdom in why HaKadosh Baruch Hu put them into our Torah.